Most American gardeners make the same mistake every single June. They walk past the perennials section at the garden center, head straight for the annuals, spend real money on plants that will be completely dead before the first frost hits in October, and then repeat the entire cycle again next May. Meanwhile, the gardener 2 streets overplanted 15 specific perennials last June, spent one afternoon in the ground, and has not purchased a single replacement plant since. Their yard gets fuller every year. Their color runs longer every season. Their maintenance bill is zero. Their neighbors stop on the sidewalk and ask what their secret is. The secret is not a product. It is not a technique. It is not a subscription service or a specialized soil amendment that costs $40 a bag. The secret is 15 plants. 15 fast-growing perennials that establish faster in June soil than at any other point in the growing season, return every single spring without replanting, spread wider and bloom heavier each year than the one before, and collectively solve every landscaping problem a home gardener actually faces. Bare ground, midsummer color gaps, deer pressure, poor soil, dry slopes, shaded corners that defeat everything. These 15 plants address every single one of those problems permanently. One June planting, a landscape that fills itself forever. If that is the yard you have been trying to build, you just found the right channel. Stay with me through all 15 because the plant at number 12 produces something in your garden that no other fast-growing perennial on this list replicates, and most American gardeners have never even considered planting it. Every plant here comes with exact bloom windows, exact hardiness zones, and the one mistake most gardeners make with each one. That is what separates a plant that transforms your yard from one that disappoints you for 2 seasons. Subscribe right now before plant number 1. Press the button below and turn the notification bell on. Plant 1. Black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia fulgida. Drive through any American town in July and look at the roadsides and abandoned lots nobody tends. Black-eyed Susan is blooming in every single one of them. Nobody watered those plants. Nobody fed them or gave them any attention whatsoever. And every summer they return as reliably and beautifully as the day they first appeared. That survival record is not a coincidence. It is the genetic constitution of a plant that evolved specifically inside North American heat, drought, and neglect. Plant it in an actual garden bed with minimal attention in June, and what it delivers will genuinely surprise you. Bright golden yellow petals surrounding a deep chocolate brown center that holds its color through brutal afternoon heat that bleaches lesser plants. Stems 2 to 3 feet tall, upright, never requiring staking. Blooming from late June straight through October. For full months of uninterrupted color from a single planting. Why June? Soil temperatures across zones 4 through 9 are warm enough to push root establishment fast, but cool enough that the plant anchors fully before peak July heat arrives. A black-eyed Susan planted in June enters its first bloom season stronger and more drought-resistant than one planted in cold April soil. Spread. 2 mechanisms working simultaneously. The root clump expands outward each season, producing more flowering stems every year. Seed heads left standing through winter drop viable seed that germinates the following spring within 2 feet of the parent plant at 0 cost. One plant becomes a colony. A colony becomes a permanent landscape feature. The mistake: removing every spent flower the moment it fades. Leave seed heads standing through winter. They feed goldfinches and sparrows through February when every other food source has disappeared. Every seed head is next season's free plant already forming. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun, 6 hours minimum. Poor soil, clay, sandy soil. This plant handles all of it. Drought tolerant after 1 full establishment season. Plant 2. Purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. The only plant on this entire list that simultaneously attracts monarch butterflies, feeds goldfinches through winter, supports native bees through the entire growing season, improves pollination in nearby vegetable beds, and carries documented medicinal properties used across North America for centuries. 5 independent reasons to grow it stacked into one plant. Bold, slightly drooping purple-pink petals surrounding a raised copper-bronze central cone that holds its architectural form long after the petals drop. The spiky seed head that remains through fall and winter looks deliberately placed, particularly striking with frost sitting on it in December. Why June specifically? Coneflower roots establish aggressively in warm June soil. Plants put in the ground this month frequently produce their first bloom flush before summer ends, something April plantings in cold soil rarely accomplish in year 1. June planting produces a stronger, deeper root system going into the first winter, which translates directly into a larger, more productive plant in year 2. Usefulness beyond beauty. For any gardener with tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, or fruit trees within 200 feet of a coneflower planting, the pollinator spillover directly improves fruit set. More bees visiting coneflower means more bees visiting every flowering plant within range. One ornamental planting, making your vegetable garden measurably more productive. Currently one of the 5 best-selling herbal immune support supplements in the country by annual sales volume. The same plant supporting your landscape is supporting immune health in households across America. The Cheyenne, Comanche, and Lakota used it medicinally for centuries before contemporary research confirmed the active compounds. Self-seeding is the primary spread mechanism. Leave the seed heads standing. Do not cut them down in fall cleanup. Seeds fall naturally into surrounding soil and germinate the following spring. A 3-year-old clump divided in April produces 4 to 6 transplantable sections, each blooming in its first season. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun to light shade. Tolerates poor, dry, unamended ground that would kill most other flowering perennials within weeks. Long-lived. An established planting expands and persists for 20 years or more without replacement. Plant 3. Salvia. Salvia nemorosa. Garden centers across America have been selling the wrong version of this plant for years. If you have ever purchased salvia as an annual, watched it bloom for 3 weeks, and then watched it slowly decline and die, what you purchased was a completely different species. The perennial salvia covered right now blooms not once, but 3 separate times in a single growing season, and comes back to do the exact same thing every year for the rest of your gardening life. Deep violet to purple flower spikes on strong, upright stems, 18 to 24 inches tall. The color is among the most saturated of any perennial available to American gardeners. It does not fade in heat. It does not wash out in full afternoon sun. That rich, intense purple holds from the moment the flowers open until the moment you cut the plant back. Why June specifically? Perennial salvia planted in June establishes its root system during warm soil conditions and frequently pushes its first bloom flush within 6 to 8 weeks of planting, giving you color before the summer season ends. 3 bloom cycles per season. First flush arrives in midsummer after June planting. Cut it back hard, all the way down to 4 to 6 inches from the ground, and within 3 weeks a completely fresh set of stems pushes up from the base. A full second flush of bloom follows. Cut it back again, and many plants produce a third flush of flowers in early fall. 3 complete bloom cycles from one plant in one season. The mistake most gardeners make, treating the cutback as optional. Skip it because the plant still looks acceptable, and you get one weakening bloom period that fades into exhausted growth by August. Follow through on the cutback after each flush, and you get 3 full, rich bloom cycles from late summer through fall. That difference comes down to one decision made with a pair of garden shears. Deer will not touch it. The aromatic foliage that smells pleasant to people is deeply unappealing to deer. For gardeners across the Mid-Atlantic, Midwest, and Northeast dealing with serious deer pressure every season, Perennial salvia delivers rich, saturated color without the heartbreak of walking outside to find everything eaten overnight. Zones 4 through 8. Full sun. Well-draining soil. Highly drought-tolerant once established. Before plant 4, drop your USDA hardiness zone in the comments right now and tell everyone watching which of these first 3 plants you already have in your yard. If you have had any of them for more than 2 years, tell the people reading below exactly how much ground it has covered. Real numbers from real yards are more valuable than anything said from this side of a camera. Every comment on this channel gets read, and your answers directly shape what gets covered in future videos. Plant 4. Daylily. Hemerocallis. Walk through any older American neighborhood right now and look at the yards of houses that have been sitting empty for months. No watering, no feeding, no maintenance of any kind. And somewhere in almost every one of those neglected yards, daylilies are blooming. Full, beautiful, completely unbothered by the fact that nobody has touched them since the previous owner moved out. That is not luck. That is the genetic constitution of a plant so self-sufficient that neglect genuinely does not slow it down. Over 35,000 registered cultivars exist. Most American gardeners grow one of 3 common orange varieties and believe they have seen this plant at its best. The color range available today: burgundy, gold, deep peach, cream, near black, soft lavender, blazing red, and bicolors that combine 2 or 3 shades inside a single flower, is so broad that daylilies alone could carry a garden from June through October without a single repeated color. Each bloom opens for one day. That is where the name originates. But a single established clump produces 40 to 60 buds across multiple stems over a 6-week window. Something is always opening. The display is continuous rather than a single burst followed by nothing. Why June specifically? June planted daylilies root fast in warm soil, and tuberous root fans establish strongly enough to push their first blooms before fall. Some varieties flower in their very first season when planted in June, a result that April cold soil planting rarely produces. Compounding value. A single clump planted this June doubles in size every 2 to 3 years. Within 5 years, that one original plant contains enough material to divide into 8 to 12 individual sections. Every division can be replanted throughout the yard or handed to a neighbor at zero cost. The initial purchase price, typically $8 to $15 at a garden center, becomes effectively zero over time. Zones 3 through 10. Full sun to partial shade. Virtually pest and disease-free across all U.S. regions. Drought-tolerant once the root system is fully established. Plant 5. Yarrow. Achillea millefolium. Yarrow has been growing in North America for thousands of years in rocky slopes, dry prairies, and thin soil that defeats almost every cultivated plant a gardener would attempt to establish there. That survival history is the reason it covers ground faster, under worse conditions, with less water than almost anything else on this list. Flat, wide flower clusters 3 to 5 inches across, held on upright stems above feathery, silver-green foliage that smells faintly herbal when you brush past it. Available in yellow, white, pink, and deep red depending on the variety. The foliage stays attractive between bloom periods, which matters for a yard that needs to look intentional all season, not just during a 2-week flowering peak. Why June specifically? Yarrow planted in June in lean, dry soil. Its preferred growing condition establishes a root network that makes it genuinely drought-proof before the worst of summer heat arrives. June is the ideal entry point for this plant. Fastest ground coverage on this list. 2 spread mechanisms running simultaneously. Rhizomes push outward underground and establish new growth points every season. At the same time, the plant self-seeds heavily, dropping large volumes of seeds that germinate in spring around and well beyond the parent plant. A well-established yarrow planting can double its footprint in a single growing season. Usefulness most gardeners never hear. Archaeological evidence places yarrow among the earliest plants humans deliberately kept near their settlements, over 60,000 years ago. Leaves carry documented astringent properties with a well-established history of use in wound care across nearly every culture on Earth. For homesteaders, herb gardeners, and anyone interested in a landscape that is functional as well as beautiful, yarrow belongs on this list for that reason alone. Plant it in your worst soil. Poor, lean, dry ground produces denser, more compact coverage and better bloom production than rich, amended beds ever will. Every division this plant produces is a free, transplantable, blooming size plant. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun. No supplemental water once the root system establishes. Plant 6. Russian sage. Perovskia atroplicifolia. Most gardeners who have tried Russian sage and been disappointed made the exact same mistake. They prepared their best garden bed, worked in rich compost, gave it fertile amended soil, and then watched the plant flop over, produce weak stems that needed staking, and bloom far less impressively than every photograph suggested it would. The plant did not fail them. The soil did. Russian sage thrives in poor ground. Not average soil. Not lightly amended soil. Lean, dry, neglected ground that has never been enriched, fertilized, or heavily worked. The specimens you see performing magnificently in professional landscape plantings, those 4 and 5 foot towers of blue silver with perfect upright structure and massive quantities of bloom, are almost always growing in soil that has never received a single bag of compost. Silvery white aromatic stems completely covered in tiny lavender blue flowers from midsummer through the first hard frost. The overall effect is an airy, luminous cloud of blue-silver color that moves in the slightest breeze and catches late afternoon light in a way that looks almost iridescent. 3 to 5 feet tall. A dramatic vertical presence that creates the kind of sophisticated, professional-looking backdrop most home gardeners spend years trying to achieve without quite getting there. Why June specifically? Russian sage planted in June in lean, well-drained soil hits its first full bloom window by late July or August, delivering its most dramatic display in the very first season. Cold spring planting in poorly drained soil is the fastest way to lose this plant. Blooms from July all the way through the first hard frost, making it one of the longest blooming and latest season perennials available in American horticulture. For gardeners in zones 8 and 9, Russian sage handles sustained summer heat, extended periods without rain, and the kind of brutal July and August conditions that eliminate most other perennials from serious consideration in those regions. Zones 4 through 9. Full sun, non-negotiable. Poor to average well-draining soil. pH 6 to 8. One of the most alkaline-tolerant ranges on this list. Extremely drought-tolerant once established. Plant 7. Coreopsis moonbeam. Coreopsis verticillata. Named Perennial Plant of the Year in 1992, not by hobbyists or gardening bloggers, but by professional horticulturists whose careers depend entirely on knowing which plants actually deliver results over time. Over 30 years after that recognition, Coreopsis moonbeam still appears on recommended lists for every region of the continental United States. That kind of staying power is not a marketing decision. It is decades of performance confirmed by real gardens across the country. A cloud, a genuine soft swaying cloud of small, buttery yellow flowers sitting just above fine, feathery green foliage. The mounding shape runs roughly 18 inches tall and equally wide. The color is warm without being harsh, working beside deep purple salvia, white daisies, or bright orange daylilies without clashing against any of them. Why June specifically? Coreopsis moonbeam establishes its underground rhizome network rapidly in June's warm soil and frequently delivers a full, dense first bloom flush before the end of summer in its very first season. June-planted Coreopsis almost always outperforms April-planted Coreopsis in year one bloom production. Every yard has a section that defeats everything planted in it. A south-facing bed baking through August. A strip along the driveway that turns to powder by July. A sunny bank where annuals collapse within 3 weeks of planting. Coreopsis moonbeam does not merely survive in those spots. It performs best in them. Heat and drought are not obstacles for this plant. Those are the exact conditions under which it produces its densest bloom coverage and its longest season. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun essential. Average to lean soil. Cut back to 4 inches in late fall or early spring. Divide every 4 years. Plant 8. Bee balm. Monarda didyma. The only plant on this list whose bloom structure was shaped by evolution specifically to feed hummingbirds. The tube length, the bloom angle, the color intensity. Every detail calibrated to a hummingbird's bill and feeding behavior over millions of years of coevolution. No other fast-spreading perennial in this climate range generates the same volume of hummingbird visits as an established bee balm planting in full bloom. Spiky tubular blooms in blazing red, deep pink, rich purple, and bright white. Stems 2 to 4 feet tall. A mass planting along a back fence or garden border creates a visual anchor the eye moves to immediately from anywhere in the yard. Why June specifically? Bee balm rhizomes spread with extraordinary speed in warm June soil. A plant put in the ground this month can triple its footprint within 2 full growing seasons. June planting gives this aggressive spreader its longest possible establishment window before winter. Usefulness beyond the visual. Ruby-throated hummingbirds covering the eastern 2/3 of the United States visit up to 1,000 flowers daily during migration. In suburban neighborhoods where tubular flowers are scarce, a mature bee balm planting becomes the primary reason hummingbirds stay rather than pass through. Gardeners with established plantings report daily visits from June through September. Bee balm leaves are edible and carry a flavor profile that sits between oregano and mint. Used in teas, as a culinary herb, and medicinally by indigenous communities across North America for centuries before it entered the ornamental garden. Choose mildew-resistant varieties. Jacob Klein for red. Marshall's Delight for pink. Divide every 2 years without exception to keep the plant vigorous and mildew-free. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun to partial shade. Consistent moisture. Plant 9. Garden phlox. Phlox paniculata. The fragrance reaches you before the plant ever comes into view. Rich, sweet, unmistakably floral, and strong enough to carry across an entire yard on a warm July evening. Most people stop walking and look around trying to identify where it is coming from. What they are smelling is garden phlox, and the flowers producing that fragrance happen to be among the most visually commanding options available to American gardeners in the summer landscape. Large rounded flower clusters, sometimes 6 to 8 inches across on established plants, in deep pink, soft pink, white, lavender, red, and bicolors with contrasting center eyes on each floret. Stems 3 to 4 feet tall. It creates genuine vertical presence and commands the eye from the moment it opens in July, blooming straight through September while temperatures are still at their peak and most other perennials have already retreated. Why June specifically? Garden phlox crown expansion moves fastest in warm, moist soil. A plant established in June develops the crown spread that produces wider, fuller bloom clusters in year 2. June planting also gives this plant time to develop strong stems before the humidity of late summer, which reduces mildew pressure in its first season. One of the most powerful hummingbird attractants available to American gardeners in zones 4 through 8. The tubular structure of each individual floret and the color range, particularly the pinks and reds, are precisely what hummingbirds are built to feed from. An established planting in full bloom from July through September draws hummingbirds back repeatedly through peak migration. Thin new stems to 5 or 6 of the strongest per clump in spring. This single step prevents powdery mildew by maintaining airflow between stems. Choose resistant varieties. David, Jana, and Robert Poor are consistent performers. Zones 4 through 8. Full sun. Moist, well-draining, fertile soil. Water at soil level, never from overhead. Right now, pause for 3 seconds. Which of these first 9 plants solves the specific problem your yard has been dealing with for years? Drop it in the comments with your state and your zone. Tell the gardeners reading below what that problem has been. Every single answer in this comment section gets read, and the most common problems described determine what this channel covers next. Your comment is not filler. It is the research that shapes every future video on this channel. Plant 10. Catmint Walker's Low. Nepeta racemosa. The first time most gardeners see catmint in full bloom with bees working every single stem simultaneously, they stop whatever they were doing and just watch. The concentration of pollinator activity on one plant is something most American yards never produce, and the effect it has on everything growing nearby is something most gardeners never connect back to this single plant. Every bee visiting catmint spills over into every other flowering plant in the surrounding garden. Pollination rates increase across the entire bed. Fruit set and seed production improve in every neighboring plant within range of that pollinator traffic. For anyone growing vegetables anywhere near an ornamental border, catmint makes those vegetables measurably more productive. Masses of small lavender blue flowers blanketing a mounding, slightly arching plant. 18 to 24 inches tall. The foliage is silvery green and strongly aromatic. Along a pathway or border edge, it spills slightly forward in a way that softens hard surfaces and reads as deliberately placed. Why June specifically? Catmint planted in June establishes quickly in warm soil and frequently delivers its first full bloom flush before the end of summer. The controlled spread habit means it fills its designated space without crossing into neighboring plants, making June establishment ideal for border definition. 3 complete bloom seasons per plant. First flush arrives shortly after establishment. Cut the entire plant back to 4 inches from the ground when that flush fades. Not a light shaping. Cut it back hard. New growth pushes up from the base within 10 days. A full second flush of bloom follows 5 to 6 weeks later. Cut it back again, and a third bloom period arrives in early fall. 3 complete cycles from one planting. One important clarification most gardeners never hear. Catmint and catnip are related plants in the same family, but they are not the same plant. Catmint does not produce the compound that causes the behavioral response in cats that catnip does. Neighborhood cats will not roll in it or destroy it. Zones 3 through 8. Full sun to very light shade. drought, and deer-resistant. One of the most reliably low-maintenance plants on this entire list. Plant 11. Shasta Daisy. Leucanthemum times Superbum. One plant, left completely alone for 3 seasons, becomes a 12-square-foot mass of white and yellow blooming from June through September without a single replanting. That is not a rough estimate. That is what an established Shasta Daisy clump does year after year across zones 4 through 9. Crisp white petals, bold yellow center, clean upright stems standing 2 to 3 feet tall. It reads as finished and intentional whether you plant 10 or 100. Full sun beats on it all day long, and the color does not fade. Cut the stems for indoor arrangements, and they hold beautifully in a vase for days. Why June specifically? Shasta Daisy root clumps expand most aggressively in warm June soil. Planting in June gives the clump an entire warm soil season to establish and self-seed before winter arrives, which means a significantly larger, more productive colony emerges the following spring. One fact that surprises most gardeners. Shasta Daisy was developed by American botanist Luther Burbank in the 1890s. Not a wildflower discovered growing along a roadside. A deliberate cross between 4 separate species engineered specifically for North American growing conditions. That origin is precisely why it outperforms so many naturally occurring plants in home gardens across the country. It was purpose-built for the climate and soil conditions American gardeners actually deal with every season. Divide the clump every 3 years in spring. Each section you pull apart is a transplantable, blooming-sized plant you can move to a different bed or hand to a neighbor at 0 additional cost. Zones 4 through 9. Full sun, 6 hours minimum. Well-draining soil. Plant 12. Baptisia. Baptisia australis. Professional garden designers know this plant well. Botanical garden curators across the country grow it consistently. Horticulturists recommend it without hesitation. The average American homeowner has never heard its name, has never seen it at their local garden center, and has absolutely no idea what their landscape has been missing. Baptisia produces tall, upright flower spikes in deep indigo blue. A true, saturated, remarkable blue that is genuinely rare in the flowering perennial world. The flowers resemble lupins in their structure, but Baptisia is significantly tougher, longer-lived, and more adaptable across the full range of American climates than lupins ever managed to be. After the flowers fade, inflated charcoal black seed pods form on the stems, almost architectural in their structure, rattling audibly in any breeze, and providing genuine ornamental interest straight through fall and into winter. Why June specifically? Baptisia is a slow establisher regardless of planting time, but June's warm soil accelerates that early root development meaningfully compared to cold April planting. Getting it in the ground in June gives this plant the longest possible warm soil establishment window before its first winter. The detail that makes this plant extraordinary: Baptisia is a nitrogen fixer. The same biological process that makes beans and peas valuable in a vegetable garden happens in the root zone of every Baptisia plant. A symbiotic relationship with specific soil bacteria allows Baptisia to pull nitrogen directly from the air and deposit it into the surrounding soil in a form that every neighboring plant can access and use. One planting decision that adds dramatic beauty, structural permanence, and actively improves the soil chemistry in the surrounding bed simultaneously. The plants growing around an established Baptisia are in measurably better ground than they were before it arrived. Do not move it once planted. Do not divide it out of impatience. Give it 3 full growing seasons of complete, undisturbed growth. Year 3 delivers a bloom display that makes every single day of waiting feel like the most worthwhile patience exercised in the garden. Baptisia plants 20, 30, and 40 years old are documented across this country, still flowering reliably, never having been replaced. Zones 3 through 9. Full sun to light shade. Average to poor, well-draining soil. Plant 13. Astilbe. Astilbe times Orencii. Every shaded corner of an American yard that has resisted every previous planting attempt has one solution that works consistently, performs beautifully, and asks for very little in return. Most gardeners drive past it at the nursery without a second glance because it does not look like much in a small pot. Astilbe in full bloom in a shaded garden bed is one of the most dramatic sights in American perennial gardening. Feathery, plume-shaped flower spikes in white, cream, soft pink, hot pink, red, lavender, and deep purple. No other shade perennial produces this kind of vertical, dramatic color in low-light conditions. 1 to 4 feet tall, depending on the variety. Plant early, mid, and late-season varieties together, and Astilbe blooms continuously from late spring through late summer in the same bed without any gaps. Why June specifically? Astilbe crown divisions establish quickly in June's warm, moist soil. The plants push root growth aggressively during June and July, which translates into a noticeably larger, more floriferous plant in year 2 than a cold April planting typically produces. Pairs directly with bleeding heart. Astilbe's foliage expands and fills in exactly as bleeding heart goes dormant in early summer, eliminating the bare ground problem completely without any additional planting required. These two plants together create a shaded bed that looks intentional and full from April through September from a single combined planting decision. Partial to full shade. Moist, humus-rich soil. Apply at least 2 inches of mulch after planting and keep consistent moisture through the establishment season. Zones 3 through 9. Plant 14. Creeping phlox. Phlox subulata. Every other plant on this list blooms in summer or fall. Creeping phlox blooms in April and May. 3 to 5 weeks before anything else on this list shows a single flower. That alone earns its place on this list permanently. The evergreen mat it produces stays green, dense, and weed-resistant through every month of the year, including the months when nothing else is growing at all. In full bloom, it is a carpet, a flat 4 to 6 inch plant so densely covered with small 5-petaled flowers in pink, white, lavender, red, and magenta that the foliage underneath disappears entirely. Draped over a wall edge or raised bed rim, it cascades downward in a sheet of color that stops people on the sidewalk. Why June specifically? June planting gives creeping phlox an entire warm season to extend its lateral stems and root them into surrounding soil before winter. Every stem that roots in summer is 6 to 12 additional inches of weed-suppressing coverage that arrives the following spring already established. Lateral stems extend outward from the plant's center and root directly into the soil wherever they contact the ground. No rhizomes, no seeds. Direct stem-to-soil rooting expanding the coverage area steadily. 6 to 12 inches per year in each direction under good conditions. For older gardeners who kneel less than they used to, a dense mat of established creeping phlox eliminates weeding in those areas completely. Native to the eastern United States and documented in American gardens since the 1740s. Nearly 300 years of proven performance in American soil. Full sun, 6 hours minimum. Well-drained soil without exception. No supplemental water after the first season. Shear lightly after blooming to keep the mat compact. Zones 3 through 9. Plant 15. Liriope. Liriope muscari. This is specifically for the gardeners in the South, the Deep South, and the transition zones who have spent years being handed ground cover and perennial advice that does not survive their first August. Almost every recommendation in mainstream American gardening fails in zones 8 and 9. The humidity is too high, the heat too relentless, the summers too long for most of what gets recommended in gardening content built for northern climates. Liriope does not fail in those conditions. It was built for them. It looks exactly like an ornamental grass, which causes most homeowners to treat it purely as a decorative edge plant, never realizing that the dense root mass below the surface functions as one of the most effective weed barriers available in their specific climate zone. Established liriope produces a root network so dense that weeds physically cannot penetrate it from below. Hand-pulling weeds from inside an established liriope planting is nearly impossible because the root network has left no open soil for anything else to anchor into. Why June specifically? Liriope is an active growth through the entire summer in southern climates. June planting drops it directly into its peak establishment window. It roots fast, spreads laterally, and closes in around bare ground faster in June than at any other planting time of year. Tall spikes of lavender to white tubular flowers open in late summer and fall, providing color exactly when most southern perennials have already exhausted themselves. Those flower spikes draw pollinators into areas that most other nectar sources never reach. Handles drought, clay soil, the full root competition from large mature trees, and the complete humidity range of southern summers without thinning, without going dormant, and without requiring a single intervention after the establishment window closes. Zones 5 through 10 with peak performance in zones 7 through 10. 15 plants. 1 June window. Black-eyed Susan, gold, chocolate centers, self-seeds, zones 3 to 9. Coneflower, monarchs, goldfinches, boosts vegetable pollination, zones 3 to 9. Perennial salvia, 3 bloom cycles, deer-resistant, zones 4 to 8. Daylily, drought-tolerant, 35,000 cultivars, zones 3 to 10. Yarrow, fastest spreader, thrives in poor soil, zones 3 to 9. Russian sage, longest bloom season, blue-silver, zones 4 to 9. Coreopsis moonbeam, buttery yellow, built for heat and drought, zones 3 to 9. Bee balm, hummingbird magnet, edible leaves, zones 3 to 9. Garden phlox, fragrant midsummer anchor, zones 4 to 8. Catmint walker's low, 3 bloom cycles, drought and deer resistant, zones 3 to 8. Shasta daisy, white and yellow colonies, zones 4 to 9. Baptisia, indigo spikes, nitrogen fixer, lasts 40 years, zones 3 to 9. Astilbe, feathery shade plumes, zones 3 to 9. Creeping phlox, spring bloomer, evergreen weed suppressor, zones 3 to 9. Liriope, dense weed barrier, zones 5 to 10. Closing. June soil temperatures are at peak establishment speed. Every plant on this list benefits from going in this month, and that timing compounds every spring after. If one of these solves a problem your yard has been fighting, hit like. New video every week. Next one covers companion planting combinations that push bloom density, spread, and wildlife higher. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Which of these 15 are you planting first? And what landscaping problem are you finally done tolerating? Drop both answers below. June doesn't wait.